We are ready to get started. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We have a few folks still funneling into the webinar, so we're going to give them a chance to do so. My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm with MadCap Software. And today I am so excited to introduce Andrea Maliska, who is the founder of Rebel Learn. And she is passionate about helping businesses break free of boring, old school learning strategies, design, and delivery. And she happens to know a thing or two about Flair. And today, Andrea is going to discuss things to consider when building and even improving a learning and development program, including requirements and resources needed to create content for multiple audiences, how to maintain your content efficiently for employees and customers, some of the business drivers that lead teams, to search for a learning management system or an LES or a CMS. And if you're unsure of what these acronyms are, we'll certainly cover that. And finally, how MadCap tools can be used to deliver content, how they can help drive engagement and also make working with subject matter experts much easier. So welcome, Andrea. We are so thrilled to have you. We have a lot to cover today. So just a couple quick housekeeping items before I turn it over. So reminder, this webinar will be recorded. So if you have to pop out early, we'll be sending a link to the recording to everybody that's registered, whether you attended live or not, you'll get the link to the recording. And we also encourage folks to ask questions. You can use the chat or the questions panel there in the GoToWebinar console, and we'll try to get to them all at the end. Whatever we don't get to, we'll follow up with a question and answer document for everybody as well. So with that, again, we have a lot to cover today. Again, welcome, Andrea. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jen. Super excited to be here. Anytime MadCap, anytime I can do something with MadCap, I'm always honored and thrilled to be able to do so. So let me go through just a little bit about myself before getting into the presentation. So again, my name is Andrea Maliska. I am the founder of Rebel Learn, which is a learning and development consultant company. I have been in learning and development in mainly SaaS and cybersecurity for a little bit over 12 years now. Have worked with several really cool software companies, lots of startups, lots of small companies, and have recently, in the past couple of years, gotten pretty deep into the cybersecurity world, which has been pretty amazing for my skill set and my growth. I have had the opportunity to build several different programs as well as corporate universities from scratch, and I've been able to do so in a wide range of industries for several different audience types and really under a lot of different budgets. So I've gone from having no budget at all up to having a multi-million-dollar budget in order to be able to build out these programs. So I have seen it all. I have had to go through a lot of different things and really wanted to bring my best practice experience to you guys today. I also have background in product management, quality assurance, and technical writing. So I really started off in the quality assurance and technical writing space back, 12 or 13 years ago. Moved into learning and development and training and leading teams, and then actually moved into product management for a little bit and worked as a product manager for a couple different software companies. And I'm back in learning and development now, but I'll say that I use a lot of my product management background when I build out training programs because I really do see training programs as being a product. And so really looking at it from that perspective has really helped me be able to build out programs in a really data-driven way, just as I would a product. So I started Rebel Learn a year ago this month. So I'm kind of, having my year anniversary right now, which is pretty exciting for me. And I left the corporate world and decided to start my own consultancy when I saw that companies were really kind of starting to go more towards understanding that learning and development was really more of a strategic position, but they really didn't know how to get there. And so, they were hiring and not sure, what questions to ask to start and what strategy to build out and how to be thoughtful about building out a learning and development program. So I decided to, start my own company, really concentrating on the strategy side of things and what I had seen. So making sure that when you are a founder, you are, an executive level, and you're looking at bringing this very important department into your company, what types of things should you be thinking about? Are you ready? Do you have the budget? Do you have the resources? Are you going to be able to be successful, and are you asking the right questions? I also build content. I'm building, video learning series right now for companies. I build documentation. I build job aids. But I also have that strategic side that I've built into my company. And just a little on a personal note, I am a Colorado native. I still live here in Colorado, right outside of Boulder. And I graduated from the University of Colorado at Boulder just a couple years ago. But yeah, that's just a personal side. I still live here with my family. I've got 3 kids, and just love living out here. It's a beautiful fall day today. So, all right, well, let's get into the presentation. So just before we get started in the presentation, I wanted to give you an idea of what we're going to be covering. So I'm going to be going through some top business drivers for why you would want to build out, or why a lot of times founders or executives want to bring in learning and development, or ask you to build new programs. We're going to go through some pain points, some impacts you might see on your team, how those types of things can affect you, the types of things you need in order to be able to effectively build content, especially when you're looking at building content for multiple audiences. And then we'll take a look at tools and what types of things and tools we will need in order to be able to do this effectively. So let's look at top business drivers first, and why a lot of times I've been brought in personally to build out programs. And this isn't an exhaustive list, so I would love to hear from any of you if you want to put anything in the chat on why maybe there have been impetus or reasons for that you've been brought in to build programs that aren't on this list. So first, one of the big ones that I have been brought in to do is to build a knowledge management system, so a knowledge base. A lot of times in companies, when companies are growing quickly, knowledge and information can get disparate very, very quickly. So you can have, very siloed groups of knowledge or information in different departments. Different departments might be using different platforms or nothing at all. There might be information on laptops, written down in notebooks, in people's heads that have been there for a long time. And as you grow and you get bigger, it gets very frustrating to the employee base if there isn't an easy way to find this knowledge. So a lot of times a knowledge base can be something that, you get to a point where employee morale might be going down. You're unable to really effectively onboard new hires. And, it gets frustrating when you can't find this information. So bringing in somebody to build out a really solid knowledge base is a good start in building out programs for learning and development. So this is one that I've definitely seen as a big driver in the learning and development space. Next, onboarding. To me, onboarding is probably one of the most important programs you can build out in a company. The effects of an onboarding program are so far-reaching, and they really do pay dividends, if you can do it well, that I think that this is one, that a lot of companies realize pretty quickly they need. Every company needs it. They're always going to be hiring individuals. They're going to be bringing on new clients to their product or to their services. So onboarding is really important. If you do onboarding really well in the first 90 days for an employee or a client, then you are at a higher success rate of keeping that individual within your company. And without doing that first 90 days, they're not getting the skills they need in order to be successful. So this one is really important for both the employee side as well as an external client. You want to keep them engaged, and you want to show them that you value them. And if a client is using your product in the right way because you've onboarded them correctly, then they're going to be happy with the product. They're going to say, yep, this is what I bought. This is what I knew I was going to be getting. And then they're going to become sticky. And both employees and clients tend to attrit much less within that first year if you have a really strong and robust onboarding program for them. Continuing education kind of comes a little bit after onboarding, and this is really for the internal employee. One thing that I have found in a couple of the companies I've worked with is, they're experiencing high rates of attrition, and they're trying to figure out why. And when they see those exit surveys, they're looking at the information coming back. And one of the big reasons a lot of individuals are attriting these days is because they're not getting the continuous education or employee development that they need in order to be able to build their skill set to move into that next role or to move up into management. And so this is a big reason why individuals will leave a company. So a lot of companies are realizing that it's not just good enough to build an onboarding program or give a manual to someone and say, hey, good luck. They're needing to continually invest back into that employee. So building out a really good continuing education program, they're finding is something that is keeping employees happy, showing them that they're valued. So this is another really good program, and one that a lot of companies will start to build out. Customer journey training. So this is going to be similar to your continuing education, but really for your customer. And it's really taking a look at what your customer's learning journey is and at what points they need certain things. So you'll have an onboarding program for your customer. You'll have implementation if you have a product. But what comes next? You can't just leave that individual, to do nothing for the rest of their relationship with you. So a lot of times what I do with this program is I will partner with marketing or sales, and we build out a really nice training program that is complementary to a drip campaign or a nurture campaign with marketing, or some sales strategy, sales enablement with the sales side of things. And it's a great way to show the company how learning and development really can be a business driver and can drive revenue within the company, partnering with marketing and sales and putting together trainings and small videos or learning aids, and making sure that you're continually at a high touch point with customers along their journey. So that's also another big one, and it's one that a lot of companies don't quite do yet, but I see it's one that a lot of companies realize they need to start doing after they've kind of put in an onboarding program. And lastly, the external knowledge management. This is actually one of the biggest drivers that I've seen, and I've been brought into several companies again to build out an external knowledge base. So, a big driver here is support team is getting a lot of calls, support team is getting a lot of tickets, and they're, the company's growing, and they need help. You need to help them unburden the support team. And so by building a self-paced knowledge base for the clients that they can access whenever they want, 24/7, and get answers to, some support questions, this is also a big one. This is one that I also think the client really wants. A lot of times, and I know how I am, when I have an issue with a product, a lot of times I just want to be able to go and find the answer myself. I don't want to pick up the phone, and I don't want to send in a support ticket unless I absolutely have to. So there is a business driver here on both the internal side to help with the support, but also on the external side where clients just want to be able to find an answer and move on. So that is a big one as well, and one that I will actually talk a little bit more about. I'll show a case study, a use case at the end of the presentation, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that. So before I go any further, I wanted to put together just a quick high-level checklist. This is not exhaustive. There are other things you want to do and keep in mind as you're putting together a program. But I wanted to put together a checklist of kind of some of the high-level things that I always make sure I do when I'm putting together a new program. So we'll start at the top, and this is a really important one, and one that I think a lot of people don't actually always ask is why. And this really comes from my product management background, is understanding the why behind why you're being asked to do what you're doing. So when somebody comes with you to build a program, why do they need that? What is the pain point or the impetus behind them coming to ask you to do that? And so this is huge, because you cannot build your learning objectives or know what your outcomes are going to be unless you understand where the stakeholder is starting. So understanding the why, and also what success looks like to them. So I would have my own idea of what I think a successful program would look like, but it may not align to what your stakeholder has in mind. So understanding what success looks like so that you can make sure that when you do provide that product, that you are, really hitting it on all levels and that it's successful. The next one is staying simple. So I think that there is always the urge to, go big and, go big right away. But I will suggest against that because I've done it and I know that it's very painful and it's hard. So I always say now, start small and targeted. Find one group that really needs training and that you can build a really solid training around, that you can really show the ROI on, that you can get done pretty quickly, that you don't have to use a huge amount of resources in order to be able to be successful in it. And then once you start small and you start targeted and people see the success that you've had and they see the impact and the value you've brought, they're going to want more. And so then that's when you can really start to bring more into, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And you're going to have people knocking down your door to ask you for training in no time at all. But start small and make sure that you are producing successes right away for the company to see what value you're bringing. Going along with that is keeping your tools light. So, again, you don't want to go within your first month or two and pick, a huge LMS, which is a learning management system, or an LES, which is a learning engagement system, and then realize 6 months down the road that, that's actually not what I needed. Because a lot of times they're really big. They take a long time to implement. And they are costly. You get into 2-3 year contracts and you're kind of stuck. And the thing about learning and development programs is that they morph over time. They grow and they change. They're very much alive. So being able to find tools that can grow and morph with you, and find tools that do several different things. So find tools that can author and that can produce different types of content, and make sure that you're doing that to start so that you can then build on top of that versus having to backtrack and have 5 platforms now that you have to manage and pay for, and now you don't need 3 of them. So make sure you're starting light and being very thoughtful on what you bring in as far as tools go. The next one is producing content that's right on time. And I think that this is definitely something that has changed over time, but producing content that is engaging and that individuals want to interact with, but also is something that they can access on their phone, that they're sitting in an office and they're about to go into a sales meeting and they're able to pull up the knowledge base or the support site and they can get the answer to a question really quick before they step into that room. So I think having something that is accessible anywhere, anytime, right when that individual needs it, that's easy to search, that's easy to find information, that the content is micro. So it's not a 40-minute video, but it's maybe a 2 to 3 minute snippet of a video. This is huge. And this is how individuals want to interact with content now. And if you think about it, this is how individuals interact with content all the time. So you want to make sure that your content is something that individuals, want to come to and are using as a tool to help them be better in their job. And the last one, this is huge, and I say it every time I speak to anyone about building out a program, is find your champions. They're all over your company. You have individuals internally that they believe in learning and development. They know why training is important. They need training. They have the pain points. Find those individuals, make relationships with them, build them training, and they will stick with you for the entire time that you're at that company, and they will fight for you and they will be your best friend. So making sure that you have champions internally is going to be huge when you need, resources and when you need SMEs and you need to be able to lean on other people in your organization. So we've taken a look at, the drivers, and we've taken a look at the checklist, but now let's talk a little bit about what type of impact building out programs can have on your team. And, I'm kind of looking at this from being brought in brand new and building from scratch, but also if you already have programs going and you're being asked to bring on more, there's a lot of time and resource and effort that goes into building out programs. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the biggest pain points that I've experienced Again, not an exhaustive list. I'm sure that we probably can talk about several others, but I wanted to talk mainly about when you're creating content as a learning and development group, you're probably being asked to create content multiple times for multiple different audiences. You may have to be building content for sales and support and an external client. Maybe you're even having to put together stuff for the board or for the executives. So taking a look at that content, most of that content, especially if it's product-based or around how to speak to the company, about 80% of that content is probably all the same. And then you have about 20% that maybe is tweaked based on your audience, based on speaking points and how this content needs to get out to that individual. So having to build 5 different documents or 5 different user guides or 5 different types of content for 5 different audience types can get really heavy really quick, and that can become very burdensome on your team. Maintaining that content is a whole nother beast. So, once you kind of get into having all this content in different platforms and different places, then finding out how to maintain it when something changes in your product or in the process or in the services that you sell. Remembering where you put all that information, remembering where the documentation is being stored, and oh, that's right, I had to mention that in that website that one time, and oh, maybe there was a job aid that you created. Maybe you have facilitator guides you've created for your trainers, and you have to make sure it gets changed there. So maintaining that content once it does change can be really, really time consuming every time there's a change. And sometimes things slip through the cracks. And so, maybe a document gets out that has outdated information on it. So those are all things you really need to think about. Again, when you're looking at a tool to produce this content, you want to keep these things in mind. Like, what is going to be the most efficient way for me to do this? And then staying on top of rapidly changing products. If you do happen to work for a software company, you know what it's like to have to keep on top of releases and builds. You have your big builds, and then you have your little bug releases and fixes and updates. And keeping on top of that, again, can be one person's full-time job. So finding an effective way and a good process to manage that is really key in order to be able to keep the effort from your team and yourself down. So I wanted to talk also about what types of things you need in order to build this multiple types of content for multiple audiences. This is, again, all from kind of just doing it myself and knowing that I had to go through a lot of pain points in order to realize what my list of what do I need for this is going to be. And so the first one really is, when you look at having to build multiple types of content for multiple audiences, finding a tool that is single source authoring is huge. And if you don't know what the single source authoring side of things is you're able to take one tool and you're able to author in that tool in one place. And anytime you make a change in that one place, it is going to affect wherever that content is being pointed to. So for instance, if you have a tool that produces documentation and a website and job aids or a facilitator guide, you make the change in one place and it will affect anywhere that content is being pointed to. So you don't have to go to your Microsoft Word and change it there and then find the PDF document that you might have out there. Anytime you change it in one spot, it changes it everywhere that might be referenced. So the single source authoring tool, that is one of my number one reasons, or number one things I look for when I'm looking at a tool. Multiple outputs is another one. Again, if you can go into a single source authoring tool and then produce 4 or 5 different outputs from that one tool, that right there has saved your team an extreme amount of time. So being able to produce documentation, because there's a large audience that still wants a manual to look at and feel and touch. Job aids, websites, knowledge bases, any of that, this is huge in order to be able to do that. And then the ability to conditionally tag content. So this is, if you have certain conditions that need to be met and then you show you show content based on that condition, that's really big when you have kind of that 20% of content that might be different. Maybe it's just for a sales team that they need to see something, or maybe it's content that's just going to go in a specific document. So being able to conditionally tag content is also a huge time saver, because you're not having to touch every single piece of material that is going out to your audiences. The other big one, we haven't talked at all about SMEs, but SMEs or subject matter experts are going to be, one of your friends. They're going to be somebody that, is going to help the learning and development team produce more content than you would have been able to without them. And a lot of times, again, especially if you're looking at software and products, your team might not have the full, depth of knowledge on the product that you need. So sometimes you have to reach out to the business analyst or the support team or the sales team or whoever it might be to get that information. So you need an easy way to be able to collaborate with your SMEs so that you can unburden your team. And the thing to remember about SMEs is that they have a full-time job already. So asking them to produce content for you is one thing. Making it super easy for them to do that is another. So this is a really big one. And also, when you're producing content as an instructional designer, being able to send that information to a SME is to review is also huge. And to make that as easy as possible is really important. Easy access to stakeholders. This is also a big one. You have your stakeholders. They have a foot in the game. They aren't going to be looking at everything all the time, every single day at the minutia, but they are going to want to take a look at content before it goes out. So being able to easily, give them information and have them review is also going to be important. And then the last one is just making sure that your stakeholders have visibility into what you're doing. They don't have the time to be continually asking you on a daily basis, what's going on? Where are the projects? How are tasks going? When am I going to get my documentation or my program or my training? So having the ability to easily, give them updates or have visibility into what you're doing will one, it will speak volumes. It will, put together a certain amount of trust between you and the stakeholder. If you have something in place, they're going to enjoy working with you, and they're going to say, yep, they're on it. They have, they understand how to manage this project and what they're doing. So having this is also a big thing for you to be able to do. So I wanted to take a look at tools, and I wanted to talk about MadCap tools, because MadCap tools I have used, and they have 100% delivered for me on all of the things that we've already talked about. But I wanted to go through and talk about which MadCap tools I've used for what. And then I want to go into a case study so that you guys can see a little bit of what it was that we built and why, and how MadCap really helped with that. So I spoke earlier about keeping things light and being able to make sure you're choosing something that really can grow with you. And that's something that Flare absolutely can do. So this is a single source authoring tool. Again, you are going to author all in one spot. You can definitely put in conditional content, conditional tagging. But the big thing with Flare that I think is huge is with that single source authoring is they have the multiple outputs. So you don't have to get a different platform for a website, and then a different platform to create documentation, and then a different platform to create your user manuals and your facilitator guides. So you're able to do all of that with one platform. And so that makes your team's job that much easier when they're able to go in one spot, and then you're able to affect change in all those different areas and produce really beautiful content in a number of different mediums from this one tool. So right there, you've gone from four tools, 3 tools down to 1. And then you have Contributor, which we brought on in order to be able to easily communicate and collaborate with our SMEs and our stakeholders. So Contributor, we didn't want our SMEs to have to get into Flare and do authoring in Flare itself. We wanted to keep that with our expert. but we did need our SMEs because we didn't know the product in the advanced and the kind of corner cases well enough to be able to put instruction around them. So we needed our SMEs to be able to put together content and then send it back to us. And we wanted it all to be integrated with each other. So Contributor does just that, is you can go ahead and collaborate with your SMEs. They can author content just like you would in a Microsoft Word document, but it's all integrated back into Flare once they send it back. And you can look at the content, you can go back and you can reorganize it the way it needs to be reorganized and put it into Flare. So that was a huge help to our team, and also really easy for our SMEs, because the way we were doing it before was not efficient through Word and redlining and all of that. So this just made that process so much more efficient for both sides. But also our stakeholders were able to, if they wanted to take a look at information, they were able to go in and take a look at this content. And then Central has actually come along after I was using Flare and Contributor in the company that I was using them in. But one of the big things that really stuck out to me about Central is when we were managing projects with Flare and with Contributor, we were managing those projects on a Google Sheet. So, that's a lot of manual work and going in and having to change things and make sure that everything is up to date before we get on a phone call to work through, hey, where are we at with this and where are we at with that? And so it's time, and it's that time and effort that we want to try and save, right? So going in and looking at something like Central, which is a project management tool fully integrated into the tool set, and you can see, where you're at with projects and with tasks, and your team can collaborate in there, and everybody can see what each other is doing. So if you have a globally dispersed team, which we had a globally dispersed team, or a team that wasn't all in the same office, this is a really great way to be able to now collaborate as a team and save time doing it. So this is a big one. It also is huge because it gives visibility to the stakeholder on where you're at with your project. So that way they can go and they have a place they can look and see, all right, I know where we're at. I see that what the progress is on different pieces of the project. So these are some of the big reasons why I chose Flare and Contributor when we were putting together the project that I'm about to talk about. So I wanted to go through a case study. When I was at a company a couple years ago, I was actually brought in, business driver, to update and make our knowledge base better. And the real driver there was, again, the company was growing very rapidly, so quick that they were having to hire they called them business analysts, and support people at kind of a high rate, and it was getting expensive. So they did have a knowledge base in place. It wasn't a good knowledge base. It wasn't, it was very hard to search. It was very hard for our clients to find anything. It was hard for our support team to find anything. There was no tagging. There was no way to really easily find what they needed. The UI was not good. So just the user experience in general was poor. But also on the back end, on the admin side of things, putting in articles and content was extremely time consuming. So we knew we needed to do something different. So I was brought on and we started doing research, and I decided we need to build something that is, a nice user interface. I need a single source authoring tool. I need to be able to have something that is going to still produce manuals, because we can't get away from that, because a large part of our audience still really wanted to have a user guide that they could print out and highlight and use at their desktop. But then we also had a group of individuals that just want to be able to self-serve on a website whenever they needed to and be done with it. So we decided to put together a self-paced learning portal, and we chose Flare to be that tool for us. And that's we brought in Flare and Contributor. But I want to talk about what it became. So it started out as a self-paced learning portal for our customer base, and it was beautiful and they loved it. And it actually became a few things. One, it became a pretty large, unique differentiator for our company. We had our product had a couple other competitors, and one of the things those individuals didn't have was a really robust learning option. So having this self-paced learning portal for the customer base was huge, and it was something that tipped the scale for some of our customers when they were deciding which person to go with. So training and learning and development can 100% be something that is a differentiator for your company. Two, we realized that when our support team was supporting our customers and they were on calls with our customers, they were using the support site we had created for our customer base to answer questions. If they had a corner case or something that maybe they hadn't seen in a while, they were going to the support site to get those answers themselves. So what we decided to do was, why don't we build an internal support site as well for our support team? And that internal site will mirror the support site, but then we can also, using those conditional tags that Flare allows, we can also have content that just our support team can see, so that we're now able to even better support our customer base. And so that was one thing that you don't know how people are going to use your product when you put it out there. But once we started seeing how they were going to be using it, most of the departments started coming on, marketing, hey, can we put our brand standards on here? Because nobody has great access to our brand standards. And that way everybody internally can see it. Support wanted to have, information up there. Training wanted to have information up there. So this became an internal support site. And along the way, it was cool because we actually submitted for a SARA award, which is a customer experience recognition award, in 2016. And we ended up winning Best in Customer Success, but we also ended up winning Best in Show. And we won Best in Show. We were a small Salesforce app, and we were building content that, beat some pretty big companies that were there that were actually up for the same award. And I 100% attribute it to the fact that we were able to do so much with Flare and Contributor. I mean, with the budget we had, we were able to do something that was much more cutting edge and much more useful to our clients than even these bigger companies that probably had much bigger budgets and larger teams. So that's kind of, the case study and how we used Flare and Contributor really to augment our learning and development team and our learning and development programs, and be able to do it really efficiently and really quickly. So with that, I am done with the presentation portion. Jen, I think you wanted to speak a little bit more about MadWorld.
Yeah, just as a reminder to everybody, Andrea's going to be presenting, kind of parlaying some of her experience and talking about some of these subjects at our MadWorld conference, which is coming up in April. So again, we have a large savings discount expiration on October 31st. And so if you pop to our website, you can get some details about what Andrew's presenting on, what the other speakers are presenting on, and more about the conference and how you can save quite a bit on the registration. We are returning to the Hard Rock in San Diego, which we're excited about. And so we hope to see you all there. And so I think we've got a few questions and some comments coming in. And, if anybody has any comments or questions they'd like to ask Andrew, please feel free to use that chat or question area there in the GoToWebinar, and we can certainly talk about it. But one thing I wanted, kind of a common theme that seems to be popping up is it's so hard to get SMEs to give feedback. And so maybe you can touch, I know you touched a little bit on the contributor side, but, I know since you did that implementation, you were talking about Central, which is great. One of the things that Central can do, because we often heard here that while Contributor was great for what you talked about, and it's meant to be this, it's not the full-fledged authoring piece, it doesn't have all the power of Flare, and it's sort of this scaled down processor. We still sort of get grumblings from folks that they have to install and learn another tool, because as you probably know, your subject matter experts can come in lots of different skill sets, right? Some can code things in CSS, and others have a hard time opening up Word and turning on track changes. At least that's what I've seen. Maybe you've seen the same thing. And one of the things that Central can do now is we can facilitate the SME review workflow in the cloud. So we don't need to install any kind of tools. We've just put this ability to have SMEs review and edit and contribute content using an extremely simple, lightweight, web-based editor. So multiple people can be in there at the same time reviewing things. So I know it's evolved a little bit since you've used Contributor. And for those on the call, I just wanted to mention that that's another bullet point to perhaps explore if you're having a hard time getting folks to install yet another piece of software to get those reviews. And I don't know if you have any other tips for folks to get to get SMEs involved, because I know there's some folks seem to be sort of struggling with that.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, when you're looking at, SMEs and being able to get feedback, again, like I said, you're probably going to be asking the individuals that have the most knowledge, are obviously they're the expert in what they're doing. So they have a full-time job with them. So some of the things that I have tried to do in the past, I mean, one is relationship building. I can't stress enough how much traction you can get when you're just building really good relationships with individuals within your company. People are much more apt to do extra if they know you and they have a good relationship with you and they know that you will do the same on the other end. The other big one that I have started doing more is making sure that I'm getting the buy-in from their boss, that this is something that they can do, that this is something that that yes, I know that they're willing, but are you willing to allow them to do this and spend time doing it? Because sometimes you get into those conversations and it's like, you know what? No, we can't allow them to be spending any time on this. And sometimes that can also be the problem. So, it takes a lot to work and get relationships with your SMEs. But I think that if you can attack it from all angles, there have been times when I actually have worked with managers and some of their not necessarily metrics were driven by this, but how often they helped or how much they helped kind of played into how their year reviews went. So it was like, hey, if we can do this and it's the sales team and we know we have to get the sales program out, can we build some metrics into that to where they have some impetus to help me? And so that can happen in some respects. But it just kind of depends on your situation and where you're at. But yeah, the SMEs are always it's a little bit hard when you're not getting it from them.
Right. And I know a couple people, mentioning too that it's how do I get them to use yet another piece of software? And so that kind of ties into that. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we developed the lightweight editor and the review workflow in Central, is that it alleviates the need to install and learn another piece of software. I mean, that the editors, if you can write an email using Gmail or Yahoo Mail, you can use this editor. Yeah, it doesn't require, if you're a Mac user, a Linux user, a Windows user, it doesn't matter. All you need is a web browser, and you have to be invited to review the file. So we tried to take some of that out of it.
Yeah.
So for those that were wondering a little bit about that. There's an interesting question that came through too. We're getting some funneling in, which is great. How do you handle having an external site that is, quote, controlled, so customers only see their one product information and does not get into the wrong hands?
So there is some technical stuff I am not going to be able to answer, but because I am not the Flare expert. But I know that when we were working on the external, we didn't have any content really that other individuals couldn't see. If it was on the website, then it was out. It was out there. If it was something that we didn't want to get into, quote unquote, the wrong hands, then it would need to be protected behind a login of some sort, and you would have to authenticate in order to be able to get into that website. So our site was open. It was secure, but it was open. But if you're looking at needing to be able to protect content, and I don't know what it means by getting into the wrong hands, if that means like competitors or what it might mean, but then you probably want to have authentication there so that your client base gets a login, which is also hard because your clients don't want to have yet another login to something. So you kind of have to weigh you have to weigh the cost benefit of that as well. Throwing another login to anybody is not great. So that also can be, anything that you don't want out to individuals can also be something that you kind of keep, and then you get to those individuals if they really need it. So I would have to know a little bit more about that situation to be able to speak any deeper on it. And that individual, if you want to email me and talk through that specific situation, just my information is on the screen right now. So
great. A question about learning management systems. What LMS tool do you use or have you used?
I've used several. I will be honest, I don't like a lot of them. And that just comes from experience. So we have used Docebo in the past. It is a cloud-based learning management system. It's good, but it definitely has its issues. It's not enterprise grade. So if you're a smaller company and you don't need a ton of bells and whistles, then I would say that was probably a good one for you. Absorb is also another good one. There are a lot of learning engagement systems that I actually like more than learning management systems. And the learning engagement system is a little bit different because they're lighter. They're typically based in the cloud. They don't have as many of the features that an LMS has that a lot of people don't use. So they're just lighter in general. And there's a couple that you can look at. There's actually one out of Spain that I really love, and it's called JVSP. So they're amazing. They're really, really great for internal employee like corporate training. But there are use cases that they can do external as well. And then there's also things that are even smaller that, maybe stuff that you only are going to engage with on your phone. And so if you look at a system called Convey Your, it's Convey and then capital YOUR. They're also a really cool company out of Washington, and they're more of a learning engagement system where they're pushing content to phones and it's all learning and it's all embedded, but it's very micro and it's very engaging, and you can kind of schedule how you do that. Learning management systems just are heavy and they're hard to turn around, and a lot of times you don't use everything that's in them. So there aren't a lot that I love. It also, just to kind of put a finer point on this, a lot of times I always build blended curriculum. So I always have a version of online and instructor led. And a lot of learning management systems don't do that well. They don't understand how to do that very well. So I'm starting to look more at the learning engagement systems versus the management systems.
Right. Yeah, and kind of to piggyback on that, and maybe to kind of expand a little bit, some folks wondering, how do you get the Flare content in these systems kind of working together? Maybe it's not Flare replacing an LMS, or maybe it is, but maybe you can explain a little bit about how they play together.
Yeah, so we actually did have an LMS when we implemented Flare as for the learning portal. We actually did have an LMS. We were using Docebo actually, where we were serving up content. And what we were doing is we were producing the documentation, the facilitator guide, the learning manuals, anything that an individual was going to be using during the training. And we were doing a virtual instructor-led training through that learning management system, as well as a self-paced online created with Captivate type of training. But any of the content that we were building, guides, facilitator guides, any of that, we were producing with Flare and then able to put into our learning management system. We didn't ever do a integration through like an API with the two, but we were definitely creating all of our learning and training content with Flare and then putting it in to the system.
And were there anything that you had to be mindful of in terms of getting the content into the system? Any special tips or tricks or did you have to be mindful of how you were structuring the content at all in Flare?
So we had our MadCap expert was putting all that together. I don't think that he was having to be mindful because it was just being output into whatever format we needed it to be put out into, which was the documentation side of things. So I don't believe so, but it's something I can reach out to him. He actually might even be on this call. But we can always reach out to him and find out if there was anything specific we needed to keep in mind when outputting that content from Flare to put into an LMS. But the LMS most LMS will take a wide variety of formats of content. So, and it doesn't have to be SCORM compliant if you're not doing the video. If you're just having documentation that you're going to have as a resource, you can put it in there easy. So.
Great. Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the time. I think we have time for maybe just a couple more questions. So I'm looking for some that it's nice to get the ones where everybody repeats because clearly that's what folks want to know. Yeah. Well, here's an interesting question. Did you create all content with Flare, including the FAQ sections? We find it difficult to keep FAQs up to date with Flare because we constantly have to republish the project.
Yes, so we did have the FAQs in the self-learning portal with Flare, and that was something I know when working with the MadCap expert, the content architect, that we were having to manually update those FAQs based on frequently asked, and then also kind of what were top topics that were kind of being searched and come up. So those were things that we did have to manually do as well when we would push builds.
Right. And maybe one last one here. Can you recommend templates or websites that can save time with the structure of the learning content as opposed to a user guide or manual?
Mm-hmm. So is that specific to Flare or just in general?
I don't know, but perhaps
okay.
I don't know if you can maybe speak to maybe both, or and we can certainly have the person who posed the question contact you directly. I think that'd be a great way to expand a bit.
Do that. Yeah, I actually don't have any specific websites that I would suggest on topics. I know that, again, I'm just going to mention his name. So Homer Christensen, he is part of Mad Skills. He is phenomenal putting together templates as well. So for Flare specifically, and that's something that he's very passionate about. And he puts together some really amazing, unique and just different. So he had put together really beautiful facilitator guides and user guides that were just different than what you'd seen before. So it might be worth contacting me and I can, give you his information from the Flare side of things. From just a normal, documentation, like if you were to build it in Word or something else, I don't have anything specific, but it really depends on kind of what your business style is. So it's like what your brand guidelines are. Sometimes marketing will put that together and won't allow you to have a lot of freedom around that. But reach out to me. I can definitely do some research and send you some cool websites.
Yeah. And I think too, I maybe with anything, maybe you agree that in terms of how the content is presented, sometimes beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Right? And so you're getting with brand guidelines, I think is important. We actually, I don't know for the person who posted the question, in terms of moving away from a traditional user guide or manual, we've recently published a number of project templates on our website that are a little bit more modern looking than the ones that come, just the standard templates like user guide manuals right out of Flare. They're free. You can peruse them on our website. You can download the projects. They come with some they come with some skins already designed, some style sheets, but they're not meant to be 100% done. They're meant to kind of get you started in terms of a look and feel. And there are guidelines in there to change elements to match your branding guidelines. But it's sort of a living site, and we're going to constantly be putting new project templates and web templates up there to get folks started. And again, it allows you to kind of go outside what you get in the box, but they're all free and they're available to anybody to download and use. So I want to make sure I mention that.
Great, that's awesome.
can help. So, well, we are at the end of the hour. I want to thank you, Andrea, for taking the time. I know a lot of you have some questions still kind of pouring in. I'd encourage you over the next minute, just go ahead and type them in. Whatever we don't get to, and we'll certainly send out with a follow-up. We'll be putting together a question and answer document for everybody that joined in, and we'll be sending that out. So look for that in the next few days in your email box, along with the recording of this webinar. So Andrea, again, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Thanks everybody for joining, and we appreciate all your great questions and comments. Thanks for doing that, and hope to see you all on the next webinar session. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.